The diner was quieter than usual that afternoon. Sarah stood behind the counter, thinking about how slow the day was. Her shift was almost over, but with so few customers, her tips wouldn't be enough to cover her rent. She glanced at the brown paper bag she'd brought for lunch, a plain sandwich and an apple. Just as she was about to eat, the door opened. A boy about 8 years old walked in. His clothes were old and worn, his hair was messy, and he looked tired and hungry. Sarah's heart sank. She recognized that look from her own childhood. She gave him a small smile and crouched down to his level. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. The boy looked nervous. "I'm just looking," he said, though his eyes kept glancing at some fries left on a nearby table. "Are you hungry?" Sarah asked. He hesitated, then nodded a little. Without a second thought, Sarah handed him her lunch. "Here," she said, smiling. "It's not much, but it's fresh." The boy's eyes lit up. "Really? You're sure?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "Absolutely. Go ahead and eat." The boy introduced himself as Jacob and told Sarah about how his mom had lost her job. Sarah listened closely, feeling sad but determined to help. She knew what it was like to wonder where your next meal was coming from. As Jacob ate, the diner door opened again. This time, a tall man in a suit walked in. He ordered a black coffee and asked Sarah what she recommended for lunch. As she prepared his order, the man noticed Jacob eating. "Your son?" he asked casually. Sarah shook her head, laughing a little. "No, just a kid who needed a meal." The man looked at her for a moment. "Not many people would do that these days," he said. Sarah shrugged. "Someone helped me once when I needed it. I'm just paying it forward." The man stayed longer than most customers, working on his laptop and glancing at Sarah from time to time. She noticed but didn't think much of it. When he finally got up to leave, he handed her $50. "This is too much," Sarah said, trying to give it back. "Keep it," the man said firmly. Then he added, "Your name's Sarah, right?" Sarah froze. "How do you know that?" The man smiled. "I've been looking for someone like you." "Someone like me?" Sarah asked, confused. "Someone who helps without expecting anything in return," he said. He pulled out a business card and placed it on the counter. "My name's James Carter. I run a nonprofit, and I'm looking for someone kind and hardworking to lead a new branch." Sarah stared at the card. "Wait, are you offering me a job?" James nodded. "Not just a job, a chance to change lives." That night, Sarah sat in her small apartment, staring at the card. James Carter, CEO of Bright Futures Foundation. She looked him up online and was shocked to learn he wasn't just running a nonprofit. He was also a successful businessman. The next day, James came back to the diner. "You didn't call," he said, sliding into a booth. "I didn't think it was real," Sarah admitted. "It's real," James said with a smile. "But the offer won't last forever." Still unsure, Sarah decided to take a chance. A few weeks later, she was working for James's nonprofit, helping families in need. At first, she doubted herself. What did she know about running a charity? But with James's support and her own determination, she found her way. Her first big project was a food drive, and she saw many faces like Jacob's. It made her work even harder, knowing she was making a difference. One day, months later, Jacob and his mom came into her office. "Miss Sarah," Jacob called out, running to hug her. Sarah knelt down, her eyes filling with tears. "Jacob, look at you." His mom walked over, smiling through her tears. "We're back on our feet, thanks to this place." "Thanks to you." Sarah hugged them both. "You don't owe me anything," she said. "Just promise me you'll help someone else someday." That evening, as Sarah locked up, James was waiting outside. "You've done good," he said simply. "I had a good teacher," Sarah replied. James shook his head. "No, Sarah, this was always in you. You just needed a little push." A year later, Sarah stood in front of a crowd at a charity event. Her voice was steady, but her eyes sparkled with tears as she spoke. "I used to think small acts of kindness didn't matter," she said. "But I was wrong. They matter more than anything because kindness doesn't just change lives, it can save them." As the crowd applauded, Sarah smiled. Her life had completely changed, and it all started with one small act of kindness.